There's nothing scarier than somebody with nothing to lose. They're going to outwork you. They're going to find ways to beat you. And so it's just an awareness for leaders to have in the back of their mind.
All right, welcome to the Matthews Mentality Podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce Chris Gannett, an international speaker, accomplished investor, and founder of Gannett Partners. Chris is passionate about leveraging business as a force for global change, combining coaching science, company building expertise, and capital to create sustainable progress and superior returns. Over his career, Chris has worked with legendary brands like American Idol, Muhammad Ali Enterprises, Elvis Presley Enterprises, and Sony, where he earned Sony's CEO Award for the Global Entrepreneurial Achievement. Chris has helped raise tens of millions in funding, contributed over $500 million in M&A and enterprise value, and even played a role in the predecessor to Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour film. He's also an active investor in companies like SpaceX. I need you to give me some stock in SpaceX, Chris. Come on. I need to get on that train. Substack and Sanzo, with notable exits including Jackpocket, which is DraftKings, and Classy, GoFundMe. As a dedicated community leader, Chris serves on the boards of the Dallas Museum of Art and Doc Cares. I know Doc. That's the homie right there. Mm-hmm. And frequently speaks at premier events like Cannes Lions and Austin Tech Week. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you.
Did I say all that correctly?
You nailed it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that bounce a quarter off it.
That was
nice one.
Hey, by the way, audience, that was a first take. I'm getting good. Chris, what's up, man? What's keeping you busy these days?
I'm in Nashville today talking to a superstar. So I'm very excited about that.
Who you meeting after this?
Yeah.
Who's the superstar?
Just you, my friend. Just you.
Oh man. I it's reverse advertisement. I paid him to say that. I'll give you a Starbucks gift card after the show.
Thank you. I've been dying to try that.
Look, we're gonna go through the whole journey here, but like day to day, what does a day in the life of Chris look like?
These days, you covered the basics of executive coaching, operating advisory, company building, and capital support. But a day in the life, one day doesn't look the same as the next. But my time is spent supporting entrepreneurs and company leaders and sports and entertainment talent and helping them become better at who they are.
And we got a lot in common. Every day I'm supporting entrepreneurs here at Matthews Real Estate, and I'm supporting athletes in my family, just emotional support.
That's right.
I'm like a comfort animal.
You
at this
are.
point,
You're a blanket. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. Oh, their careers are over and they call like, well, what do I do now? It's like, not my problem, dog.
Yeah, exactly. Call Chris. He'll help you with your V2.
That's right. Yeah, I'll get you on TV. So you got, you have a lot going on in terms of a lot of hands in different pots, but also you got two, 14-year-old kids?
I do. I have
it's a full-time job.
William, and they're amazing. Yeah. That's my wife, Lisa.
That's good. You said earlier, I love it, so I'm going to repeat it. Was a mathlete and an athlete?
I got a mathlete and an athlete.
That's cool. I've never heard that before.
Yes, we're well hedged.
That's funny. So, all right. So let's kind of lay out your story for the audience. I'll start at the beginning. Like, where'd you grow up? What was your life like as a kid, and see how it kind of led you to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. One,
it's all good.
It's a pleasure to be here. I was born in Dallas, Texas. Raised in an area of Dallas called the Park Cities, Highland Park. Went to Highland Park High School.
Is that the Scots?
That's the Scotties. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's a football powerhouse, right?
We've produced a couple athletes. Yeah.
Now, is that where? Oh gosh, was it Matt Stafford and Clayton Kershaw went?
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
yeah.
I know that.
No pressure to be an athlete.
No, not at all. Those guys are pretty good.
If they stick with it, I think they're gonna become.
They
something.
might be able to make a living playing sports.
Yeah.
But
keep making good decisions.
So Highland Uni Park.
Yes. So I grew up there. My parents divorced when I was very young, so I was raised by my mom, single mom. Unique scenario in that we weren't. I didn't want for anything, but we weren't at the top of the socioeconomic pile. But my mom is educated, with 2 Ivy degrees, raised by wonderful New England family. And so instilled, I like to say that I was raised by Emily Post, right? Hospital corners, manners, taste.
Cotillion.
Cotillion, yes, very much so. So I had all the advantages of that anyone could hope for, but also learned to fight. And somewhere along the lines, I was given the gift of grit and perseverance. And
do you think some of that had to do with? And I'm going to stereotype here, push back. I don't know if this is true. I feel like it is. Let's call it the 1980s, right? In Dallas, like being a single parent household was not common, right?
It was far less common than it is today. Yeah. As a Gen Xer, I would have been called a latchkey kid.
Got it.
Working mother, let myself in, but had love and support, that I needed, and had enough exposure to my dad that I didn't feel like that was a gap in my life.
Yeah, part of what I was kind of exploring is you said, hey, I found or kind of discovered or developed grit, and wondering if some of that had to do foundation of it from being in a single parent household.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but having a mother who this is deeply ingrained in me, who talked about her experiences at Harvard and Northwestern, without saying, "I'd like you to become somebody." She said it pretty loudly, and so I always, to a degree, had maybe a little bit of a chip on my shoulder.
And then it's like talking about expectations, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like she didn't say, "Hey, I expect this of you," but it was kind of a latent, maybe hidden, but there feeling like I better go do something.
Well, I mean, reflecting on your own experience, you grew up in a household.
Dude, hey, hold up, time out.
Athletes.
I am not here to talk about me. All right, you're not allowed to psychoanalyze me.
Fair enough.
I love it. Guests always try and turn it on me. I was like, no, that's not how this works. All right. No, but
you'd certainly understand. I'll leave it at that.
Of course, yes.
But yeah, I sort of it's imprinted on you that that both you have the ability and you have the tools, and you will hopefully have the access to become what you want to become.
For me, yeah, just in all seriousness, it's my dad, having played football to the level and to the amount of time, he literally never said, you need to play football. I didn't even play football till 9th grade. I played soccer, basketball, baseball. And it was just like this, what I call society pressure, and I don't know if you felt that. It might be more like tangible from an athlete's perspective, where it's like, oh, you're so-and-so's kid. Like, oh, you should be good at football. And then over time, you're like, well, I guess I better play that sport. Like, and I don't know if it was a similar experience, but no, I to your point, I as much as I can, I definitely understand that feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And, again, going back to the Highland Park thing, if you weren't an athlete, like, did you exist? That was an existential question. And so, I came to the conclusion that I probably wasn't going to start as a soccer player. I probably wasn't going to start as a football player. And so that sort of persevering orientation led me to evaluate a bunch of other sports. And I found cross country and track that was kind of a clearer lane for me, right? There were less athletes doing it at the time. It's a much more popular sport now. And it afforded me the opportunity to figure out if I could do this. And there isn't a tougher sort of proving ground for grit and perseverance.
I was going to say that's a mental toughness sport.
It is. Yeah. And, what I found was I wasn't the best at the start, but, by the end of my high school career, I was a ranked Texas runner, and I went up to walk on at University of Kansas. What I don't say is I promptly quit after some time trials that were, brought me back to reality.
We call it retiring here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Retired gracefully.
But, running has always been part of my life.
You still run?
I do. Yeah.
It's like serious question. Like, does it wear on your body, your knees, back? Like, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
This is how I've justified not running my whole life.
Yeah. And I also visit the dermatologist every once in a while, as a fair kid.
Is that just because you're in the sun all the time?
Runs outside. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But no, I I've run several marathons, and earlier in my career, I probably stayed out too late before a few of those, but still managed.
Anybody can run well rested and sober,
right? Exactly.
For the birds.
But yeah, who stays out until 3 a.m. and then is at the starting line?
Yeah.
At the Verrazano Bridge for the New York Marathon.
Yeah, I might have done that in college once or twice, where we had weightlifting and workouts at 5:30, and may or may not have slept the night before. Not often, but you need about 2 of those experiences to say, I can't do that again. The first is like, well, maybe that was a fluke. The second is like, nope, can't do that.
Yeah.
So runner in high school, like, again, expectations in the household, but jumping forward into your career, having worked very hard to experience success, do you think you got a lot of that by watching your mom grind it out?
Definitely. And I watched her experiment. She was trained in education. She was a teacher. She started out teaching elementary school in Winnetka, Illinois, and then met a charming advertising executive who was my dad, very much in the kind of Mad Men mold, and stopped teaching. And then when they moved to Dallas, became a housewife until they split. And so growing up through high school, I also got a really great sort of classroom in the value of anchoring your life around purpose and values. Her purpose was me. Her values were being available to me in ways that, a lot of parents aren't. And so she substitute taught. She sold real estate. She launched a ceramic jewelry line and sold that through relationships at Hortshow and Neiman Marcus. And guess what all my high school girlfriends got for their birthdays?
Hey, that saves you a little dough.
It was good to have. But that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship as well, in retrospect. And I've sort of carried that forward. The idea that our path isn't predetermined necessarily from a career standpoint, and that we have permission to try a bunch of things and see what fits. In my coaching business, just to kind of switch tracks a bit, when I'm talking to executives in transition, I like to remind them that, our career and our career path isn't a suicide pact. Right?
Yeah.
You can change lanes. You have agency to determine if what you're doing today fits with who you are today, because we change. Our interests change. I'm a great example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Change. Yes. I always say evolve. Like we just, I always talk about motivations, and I'll ask you this question later. It's like, what were your motivations at this period, and how did they evolve, and what are they today? But, it's, and it sounds like you were, and you use the word entrepreneurial, but like you didn't necessarily grow up and say, this is what I'm going to do with my life, and that's all it's going to be. Like you were kind of open-minded to different professional pursuits.
I think that's a kind way to say it. I think I can tell you that
I've been in sales a long time. I got to find the words.
I think, another way to say it is I didn't know where the career services office was in undergrad.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, what type of student were you? And again, your kids might listen to this, so like you got to be careful what you say.
For sure. Yeah. No, I was I majored in Fiji in undergrad.
What's that?
That was Phi Gamma Delta. That was my fraternity.
Dog.
So no, I was a good student. I was a solid A-, B+ student. In undergrad, and didn't really find my calling until I decided to go back to business school. And then I was a different student after that.
I want to touch on business school in a second, but like if your mom was sitting here, or your teachers, would they say, oh yeah, we definitely saw that Chris was this guy and he was going to, whatever he chooses to do, he was going to do great? Or was it, would they be surprised a little bit?
I don't think anyone would be surprised.
Yeah.
It's fun to go back to high school reunions. I was a different kid then. When I went back to my 20-year high school reunion sometime back, a lot of my classmates asked me if I was still an artist.
Oh, yeah?
Haven't been an artist for for a long
And
time.
do they mean like a literal like painting artist,
Yeah,
or
yeah. When I was in high school, and not to dwell on high school, it's almost irrelevant now. But formative years, I was always I was an artist. I was an entrepreneur in high school. Designed T-shirts for every club. I was the art director of the yearbook.
Wow.
I was
a creative, as they
on
say
the
today.
on the literary board and kind of all of that. And really didn't envision a use for math probably in my future if you'd asked me back then. That's obviously changed.
I was gonna say you got you need math to count those dollars. I didn't know if you meant artists like you were like because you've had such a career, and we'll cover it in the music industry, right?
Yeah.
And being in and around that industry for so long. I didn't know if you were artists like you were dressed in like a Run DMC Adidas tracksuit with a Kangol hat and a gold rope chain.
No.
Yeah, hip hop.
No.
I mean, I know your boy's a doc, so like, and he was in Dallas. I didn't know if you were part of that band he started.
Yeah, NWA. No. No, he and I are definitely the odd couple. We wouldn't naturally be paired together.
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking NWA, but like I think he had a band.
Oh, Phil a Fresh Crew.
Phil a Fresh Crew,
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't think you would have been invited to NWA.
No, listen, again,
No
seasons of life,
That's right.
We were brought together, at the right time in the right place.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're a good student. What did you major in as an undergrad?
I'm majored in journalism. So
Okay.
I was journalism and advertising. And I went to an undergrad that emphasized, that had a great school for that. And having a last name spelled Gannett was helpful too. As they own USA Today. And so I had my professor's attention as well, even though I didn't materially
Did you correct him?
benefit.
You said, well, yeah. It's all, I don't like to talk about this.
Yeah. I sort of gave him a wink and didn't really acknowledge it. But probably didn't actively correct them either.
They let you in thinking they're going to get a bunch of buildings, named after you. But
who knows?
That's neither here nor there.
Yeah, but no, I graduated with journalism and advertising and went into marketing because my dad was in marketing, and that was I really didn't know that there were other careers. Honestly, pretty naive kid that wasn't really thinking about the future, but went into a career path that I'd seen, and this is a theme that we can come back to when we get to kind of what's happening in the current day here. But I think when kids see something, they can be it. If they don't see it, they don't know it exists, even if they learn about it, in a book. And so for me, what I had seen was advertising and marketing. And so I just naturally selected into that.
What year was this?
Path. I graduated in 1995 from college.
So 1995, you go into advertising and marketing. What company is this? Where is it? Like, what are you working on?
Yeah, so I looked for a job everywhere but Dallas, my hometown. Where I got hired was Dallas, my hometown. I worked for a year, maybe just a little over a year, at an advertising agency there called Publicis Bloom. And worked on really sexy businesses like super polygrip denture adhesive and
I guess
La Quinta Inns.
It's a growing market,
right? Right.
Population's increasing.
Yeah, it's true. I
Don't
mean,
sleep on
look,
the La Quinta Inn.
People are losing teeth.
La Quinta Inn's got a mean 1-bedroom corner suite.
If you have breakfast, isn't your day complete?
Yeah.
And so
they got the green eggs and ham laid out. It's part of the.
I know
that.
I know you stay there when you travel.
I don't like people to know where I'm staying.
Exactly.
If people knew I stayed in bougie places like La Quinta Inn, I would lose a lot of street cred.
They'd change the way they look at you.
Exactly, and I don't want that. It's important that I maintain.
So I learned blocking and tackling of marketing and marketing communications. And then really the theme of my career is developed some great relationships there who left and went off into the world. And, one of the themes of my career is collecting amazing people and then manufacturing ways to keep working with them. And so an alum of the agency went to Dr. Pepper 7-Up, and recruited me there as an associate brand manager. And
I was going to ask how you left after. So you were recruited over there, and was that also in Dallas?
That was in Dallas, yeah. And in a very short amount of time, really 2 years, crammed a great deal of meaningful experience from, working on the America's beverage portfolio, which was Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, A&W Root Beer, kind of all of these different flavors in the non-cola category, if we're getting technical.
Mm-hmm.
The company was Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, then it became Cadbury Schweppes, and we brought together 2 organizations from Connecticut and Texas. You can imagine how well that worked.
A great culture fit.
Yeah, it was a natural synergy.
Especially like old Texas,
There were a lot of
good old
boys.
Yeah.
And that's what made that company kind of magical in some ways and it held it back in some ways. But got to experience that, survived that merger, and then, was recruited out of that opportunity into everything that, happened after.
I want to go on that trip with you before we do. So you start at Publicist Bloom, then you go to, let's call it Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
What was the day-to-day like? Like, what time would you get in the office? What time would you leave? Like, I always start, especially early in someone's career, I have this, I have a philosophy based on like, this seems to be a pretty consistent story with high achievers. Like they worked really hard, but like, what was the reality on the ground like for you early in your career in terms of, balancing work and your life?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I was young, I was single. My priorities were probably anchored more on lifestyle early.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not live close to the office. I lived in downtown Dallas in a warehouse that had been converted into lofts, and it was near live music, where I could go see live music.
And that was just giving people a preview. That's always been a draw to you.
Yeah, always. I was the kid in middle school that was in his bedroom reading liner notes of CDs.
Mm-hmm.
But I commuted up to what's Frisco, Texas now, to Dr. Pepper, and I was at my desk at 7:30 in the morning,
mm-hmm.
probably a little earlier than most, and I stayed later than most, and I didn't see a reason not to invest in my career that way because I didn't have anything holding me back or requiring my time in other ways.
How do you approach, or what are your thoughts about, and you're a business owner, you've run large businesses or departments and divisions, about, the younger generation today on average, I'm generalizing here, comes into their career at 22 out of college, let's say, with the expectation of a balanced life?
Well, we have interesting dynamics associated with all of the generations in the workplace right
mm-hmm.
now, right? And I'm Gen X, but I'm not the oldest in the workplace. And one of the challenges are within a company and its culture is ensuring that each one of those generations understands each other. Today's workforce has a different view of how their lives should run. They are more concerned with experiences and living a complete life, which is less weighted on work, right? And so it's a balancing act for employers to figure out how to provide them with what they need to be fulfilled while still outperforming the business objectives that the company sets for itself. I have a personal opinion that the way to get ahead and stay ahead is to outwork your competitor.
Yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of different ways to accomplish that and to bring awareness to ways to get there that foot with the way each of these generations kind of view the way they want to manage their lives.
I had this conversation literally yesterday with a guy who was sitting in my office, and he was lamenting the newer workforce about they don't want it, and it's like, well, we seem to do okay finding some that do, and yeah, maybe it's harder. You got to work harder to find the people who are like, yes, I want to outwork because I must be successful. I agree with your belief that the more successful you want to be, the harder you have to work. But I also wonder, just to throw this out, I wonder, it's like they talk about how much wealth the boomer generation has. And if you look at the age of the boomer generation over the next 10, 20 years, a lot of them will leave us. And then ultimately that wealth will go to a lot of the 20-year-olds who are entering the workforce. So I was like, respectfully, they may not have the same financial pressure, where whether they kind of know it directly or not, it's like they know that their nest egg, their retirement actually has already been in a way solved for, And so they almost get the luxury of saying, I'm going to evaluate what I do for a living and how hard I get after it based more on just financial independence.
Yeah.
Because some of that equation has already been solved for them.
Yeah.
And you see it, in just the financial support 20 and 30-year-olds get today from their parents relative to you and I, where it's like, hey, good luck, son. Like, Godspeed. I hope you do well.
Yeah.
Don't come home. It's, I always wonder how much of that is a driver where they can focus on whether it's called balance or fulfillment or satisfaction that isn't totally correlated to the success and financial success they experience.
I think, that's definitely a clear and present dynamic, right? But that really only accounts for one part of the whole story. How we have to frame the problem, right? So how do these kids, what is success for them? And for my generation, it was financial gains. Like, how much stuff can I accumulate? That was sort of the top marker for success in a lot of ways for a lot of people. Maybe it isn't still today. It's not the same for Gen Z. It's very different. And to your point, maybe they don't feel the same pressure we do because we didn't have, generational wealth passing down or some level of inheritance. But that's also just one part of the pie, right? The rest of the pie doesn't have that wealth being distributed to them. The duality of my life is I work with high-performing, very successful company leaders, company builders, boards, investors, sports and entertainment talent. But I also spend 3 days a week in South Dallas, where in one square block, 47% of the kids are absent from school. Right? In this zip code, it has the highest rate of murder in this city. And this is the work that the DOC and I are working on. Yeah. But, what happens to those kids? And what happens to those kids relative to what's happening with their counterparts who are the beneficiaries of some generational wealth? Somebody's going to outwork the other one. Yeah. Right. And that sort of, career arbitrage is also something for us to watch. The idea that the segment that's receiving inheritance, wants to live a more balanced life means that they may lose on some other dimensions to hungrier folks.
No doubt. And you see that again, generalizing, like a lot of immigrants who come to this country do very well, right? They seem to achieve and do well. And I think there's a hunger there, it's because they have opportunity in the U.S. and it's a complicated topic, especially right now. But I'm saying just like right. There are immigrants who come to this country and they do great, and they have a hunger perhaps that sometimes, people who are born to more here, again, it's not a judgment. It's just, they just don't need to, I guess, in a way. Yeah. Because again, some of that, the financial anxiety that exists for everybody, whether they're aware of it or not, has been solved for. Yeah. Well, I like to say there's nothing scarier than somebody with nothing to lose. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true in a lot of senses. They're gonna outwork you. They're gonna find ways to beat you, and so it's just an awareness for leaders to have in the back of their mind. So speaking of outwork, you're at Dr. Pepper, and then a special place in my heart. Somehow you find your way to Oreo. How did that happen?
recruiter
Yeah.
called me.
It wasn't just you were crushing Oreos to the head every Saturday, and you're like, I got to work for this place.
No, I wasn't. I was drinking probably 15 diet, soft drinks a day, which, is going to definitely shorten my lifespan here. But no, I got a phone call from a recruiter and had an opportunity to interview, with an amazing team on an amazing product, and get called up from the minors.
Sorry, I'm laughing. I'm thinking, you ever see that movie Tropic Thunder? You remember Lex Grossman? Tom Cruise was like that big, heavy
With the big hands. Yeah.
Lex Grossman. He's like, Diet Coke. That was you.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you like, give me some of those Oreos. So you got called by a recruiter, and it was just too good of opportunity to pass up.
It was. Again, why do you choose a school to go to? Well, you like the people, you feel like you fit into the culture, and you want that opportunity. And that was my instance with Nabisco at the time, which is now Mondelez. But
Was this in Dallas?
This was in East Hanover, New Jersey.
Oh.
Yes, and Parsippany, New Jersey.
I feel like I'm just kind of picking up vibes. I feel like you were looking for a reason to get. I mean, you said you were looking outside Dallas. Like, was that part of the draw? Like, getting to the city?
I think part of me was what I really wanted to do when I grow up wasn't in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't in the Dallas that I grew up in. Now Dallas is very different today.
Is very different.
Yeah, we can talk about that down the line, but. I was ready to do something else. It was scary. I didn't have, a big network there, but it was something that was just, too compelling for me.
Where was your MBA within this? Was this before?
This is before MBA.
Okay.
So I was kind of unique in that, I was an associate or senior associate brand manager at Nabisco without an MBA, and that came with its own set of challenges. There weren't too many of us, but it also lit the path to.
I was going to say, do you feel like it was somewhat a hindrance for you not having that?
I didn't see it as a hindrance, but it was a library card I didn't have. Right, I could have been very successful not going back, but it was a card that needed to be punched in order for me to continue to progress if I were to stay in that career. And I had decided that I wanted to change careers, and an MBA was the right choice for me to be able to do that.
And what year was that?
I left New York in 2001. Yeah, in August.
Oh wow.
Of 2001. Yeah, it was
1 month.
Interesting timing. Yeah.
And you went back and got your MBA at
I went to Washington University in St. Louis.
That's a great school.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you I've heard people say, I didn't, the MBA getting it is valuable, but I didn't necessarily learn. I learned a lot more. Just, was that your experience or?
No, I had a different experience. Yeah. And the choice of whether or not to go to business school is very personal, and it's not for everybody. But it was right for me. I was heavy on, liberal arts and communications and writing, but I was light on finance and strategy. And so, it was an opportunity for me to fill out the rest of my Scantron, so to speak, and exposed me to amazing classmates and opportunities that I didn't know existed, and ways to get involved in communities in ways that I didn't know. It really opened my eyes in a lot of ways, and my golf game improved, which is really important.
Was that just because of the business aspect?
It's just business school. Yeah.
Is that a thing? I don't know. I'm not a golfer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, neither am I anymore. But it was very appropriate for the time.
That's interesting. It's such a cliche, right? So you go to business school, then what happens after?
I like to say I drank the punch. I went to business school and I switched out of marketing into strategy and finance, and I did my summer associate at Citigroup. And got an offer at the end of the summer and went back full time after I graduated.
And back to New York.
Back to New York, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Citi, very different than your previous stops, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How
some people whiplash.
Yeah, I was going to say, how was that a juxtaposition?
It was there are some through lines to my career, and really, it goes back to people. And so, at Dr. Pepper, at Nabisco, and at Citi, and then really everything that came after that. What I was most attracted to was the idea that I was working with really brilliant people and a wide array of personality types. And at Citi in particular, that was much more global than any company that I'd ever worked for. I was in my associate class, I was the only American, and I was the only Texan. And so
you should have just leaned into that and wore boots and a cowboy hat every day.
I did, after
you want to talk about marketing
after
and
a couple
branding,
drinks, the valves get soft.
I was going to say,
so that came out, but no, it was amazing. And, those friendships still exist. And, I was privileged to go to some weddings and be invited to weddings in, India and Nigeria and have friends, in Turkey and the nature of the business of Citigroup at the time being as diversified as it was in the program I was in, which was a rotational program, had opportunities to work in a lot of different global geographies and spent a lot of time in the UK and traveled a great deal.
And what were you primarily focused on while at Citi? Like what industry or what department, what division?
Yeah, so I was in a program called the Management Associate Program, and I rotated through securities, services, treasury, global markets, and ended up running a business in their payments group and global transaction services.
So true finance, because you're in marketing, and then you get a business degree to kind of shore up this financial soft spot that you felt you had, but then, and so you really went into, like high finance. Yeah.
And I didn't really like it.
I was going to say, I mean, as someone who, it sounds like historically as an artist, someone drawn to music, someone drawn to marketing and branding, it seems like, what part of the brand? Is that the right part or the left part? You really went, you spent 4 years at Citi, you really were using the other part of your brain.
Yeah, I was. And I felt that. And, after I was there for 4 years, and in the second year, I really acknowledged that I wasn't flexing that part that really gave me the most joy. And, we had a conversation prior to this, and so I'll rehash it. But yeah, I had what I call my Jerry Maguire moment.
You take the goldfish?
If I'd had a goldfish, I would have taken it. But I took a weekend and I kind of, spent some time by myself reflecting on what I really liked and valued about the career I was developing at Citigroup and what I was missing. And ultimately, I came to the idea that if I didn't take my shot at 33 or 32, the age that I was at the time, I'd wake up at 52, the age I am today, wondering what I did with my life. And I joked I'd be in the fetal position, rocking back and forth under a desk somewhere. It wouldn't be that severe, but
so you would have been all right.
It would have been fine, but I would have been unfulfilled. And so I landed on the idea that I was going to just kind of stop making excuses for why I didn't work in the music industry, which was my personal passion.
When did you really come to the conclusion that you wanted to be in the music industry?
When I was 13.
Okay, and that it just stuck with you the whole time.
Yeah.
So no matter what you were doing, whether it was marketing at Oreo or finance at Citi, you don't let me put words in your mouth. You really were like, I would like to find a way to the music industry, or even I'm doing this as a means to get to that.
Maybe subconsciously.
Okay.
I was always looking for ways to bring entertainment into the scope of what I was doing. So whether that was, working in consumer packaged goods and looking for ways to leverage our brands into entertainment, culture shifting opportunities through sponsorship, things like that. It was a way for me to get close to it. But at this point in time, that we're talking about now, it was, I'm living in New York, I'm at the time single. I'm going to shows 3 nights a week. It's very much part of my lifestyle and kind of who I am as a person and my identity. And I saw the type of people who are successful in music and thought, you
can do that.
I can do that. And so I began volunteering on record label street teams at night.
To volunteer, do you get paid?
No, I get paid. I got paid in music. Now I'm 52, so I got paid in CDs. And I worked for.
You could have been. Listen, I'm 42, and I had CDs for me was like 4th, 5th grade. I had cassettes before that.
Sure.
I mean, you probably
absolutely.
Probably sold some cassettes out there.
I was hustling. I'd take my tie off and just, line up with the rest of the music weirdos and hand out, bumper stickers and CDs. And
where do you do this?
posters.
You just like a random street corner? Do you do it outside, like
posters outside of Tower Records?
I was going to say Tower Records. Yeah,
I would stand out in front of the Mercury Lounge on the Lower East Side and hand out.
Tower Records. Like, people talk about. I remember going to Blockbuster, which is true for us. But like, dude, I went to Tower Records too. Like, you'd go and they had all the CDs and
absolutely
the new CD, and you'd see which aisles, and you find like the tab, and then you'd be like, "There's no CDs here. Like, people got them already."
Spend time at the listening station. Yeah, that was me. And this was back in the day of the Virgin Megastore in Union Square, and wow. I discovered a lot of artists that way. And there were many weekends where I was in record stores by myself for a couple hours, just checking out new music. But I volunteered on, XL, Beggar's Banquet, Universal, Sony.
You had such a love for music.
I had a just crazy love
passion,
for music.
as they say.
Yeah, and that was not a means to an end. I wasn't doing that to fulfill myself. It was literally, the goal was build relationships that I could.
So it was strategic.
Yeah, it was very strategic. Yeah. And a lot of people thought I was nuts. Like, what are you doing? But 2 years from that decision, I joined Sony full time. And,
I was going to ask, how did you pivot from City to Sony?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. The math doesn't math for
Step back. Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a step back, right? And my profile wasn't immediately understood by the music company.
You were a suit.
I was a suit.
You were one of us.
I was a suit. I was 100% a suit.
The madman.
And the dumb questions I asked in my early interviews, about the P&L of the business, and turned some people off, but turned the right people on. And I progressed through those interviews, and spent my final interview with a wonderful man who's the CEO of Apple Corps, the Beatles, business for the last 15 or 20 years.
I've heard of them.
Just talking about music. That was the substance of the 2-hour interview.
That was the moment where they said, "Okay, this is our guy." Like, they could tell, like, this wasn't just a job for you. This was this was a love.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for him, but that was, I left feeling very good about the opportunity, and I took the job. And yes, it was a step back, but I had this inherent belief in this opportunity aligning with my values and purpose, a confidence in my abilities to succeed in the role that was in front of me, and this view of how I shape this into something that's sustainable. And within a couple of years, I was back and exceeding the switching cost.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So what was the role? Like, what was the job description? It was the first role that I took was the senior director of strategic marketing for Legacy Recordings, which was the name of the worldwide catalog. And almost immediately thereafter, Jeff stepped out of his role as the president of Legacy, went to go work for the Beatles. A new executive came in, and a new vision was cast for creating something called the Commercial Music Group, which kind of rolled up a bunch of divisions within Sony Music Entertainment. There was the worldwide catalog. It was custom music. It was a bunch of businesses. And the mandate from our CEO at the time was go make music outside of shiny discs. And, through, hard work, some attrition, I rose to leading strategic marketing there. And we grew that to half the company's global revenue. Was this around the time that first the iPod, was that I'm trying to think, like it was MP3 players, iPods. And then obviously the iPhone, having on the phone on a smart device. Was this around that same time?
It was.
Like, was that something you had to navigate?
Yeah, the iTunes store and the dawn of streaming.
Well, I don't want you to get mad at me, man. I was bootlegging songs on Napster in college.
Yeah, me too.
Burning CDs.
No, in grad school it was
selling them in the locker room for $10.
all I was
right.
on Kazaa.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did your industry like that.
No, but you can.
I was poor.
Yeah,
I was pretty
Sean
poor.
Fanning, are you listening? Yeah, no, I was too. And, there's a reason why that ultimately, that was a force that couldn't be tamed. But yeah, for sure. I was there in that moment of kind of a move from, the wildly profitable CD to the a la carte model of selling downloadable music to the dawn of streaming, for a fee that all you could eat. The ad-supported model and wrestling with that and launching Vivo on YouTube.
You got thrown so many existential industry threats, right?
Yeah. And some of it was obvious to some of us, and it was something that other executives didn't want to acknowledge would be the future of the industry. But we know now that it was the dawn of the next chapter of growth, and everybody's flying private again.
And so that's funny. How long were you at Sony for?
5 years.
And how was the experience relative to your expectations when you went in? Like, did it fulfill you the way you?
It was awesome. It was awesome. I mean, every job that I've had some frustration with. I challenge anyone to say, that their day-to-day life is frustration free and they're in the flow all the time. But I loved it because it got me close to the things that lit my fire. Working with artists was great. Being an ambassador of music and its role in culture to other industries was a privilege. And being at the table to think through the evolution of the business model was super fun. Like, I couldn't imagine, being at Citi instead of being at Sony at that point in time.
Well, especially you're at Sony 2006, 2011. Imagine being at Citi when the GFC hit. You got good timing.
Yeah.
That's some good timing right there.
All by design.
Of course, you saw it. Yeah. This is a big question. Like, what do you believe? It's a big question to ask. Like, answer. What do you believe led to your success in these roles? Like, if I were to ask your boss, like, at the time, hey, why was Chris so good at the execution of the role? Like, what do you think you were bringing to the table that really allowed you to excel in these positions? Yeah.
Well, I can't say for certain. You'd have to ask them. But I would think, a genuine love of the work of the business, right? A passion for, wanting to see that industry succeed. And, selfishly, I loved being able to hear music from artists that I cared about before anybody knew who they were. I had a piano in my office on Madison Avenue that Leonard Cohen sat down and played on, when he was in the office.
And because of your...
Like, who gets that opportunity?
I was going to say,
right?
like, we kind of call that, like, it's like phantom income. I know there's an actual tax definition of what phantom income is. So put that... But it's like, it's a type of compensation or income, but it's not a traditional, here's cash or bonus or shares. It's like, it had a real value to you that, to someone else there may be
That's right.
little to no
They may not know who he is or they may not care. But for me, that was like, made me feel like, Forrest Gump just bumping into greatness day after day, by accident. And so that was gravy. That was icing on the cake for me. It's amazing.
And so with this love of music, why did you, eventually leave Sony? I think your next stop was with Muhammad Ali Enterprises. Like, what led you to leave the music piece? Yeah.
Well, the opportunity, at the time, the industry was going through significant tumult. Sony was going through its own set of growing pains. And I had lost 2 mentors just to attrition. And I was taught early from, many of my colleagues and mentors who were lifers at Sony. They used to joke. One in particular said, you got an MBA, I went to fucking Pizzeria U, but what that individual taught me was the corner office is your last office if it's not your company. And I made it to the corner office, and I could see that I was going to need to, there's going to come a time when either I self-selected into something else or I was invited to do something else.
Yeah.
And so at the time I was interviewing for the CMO at Forbes. And then a dark horse recruiter called me and said, the owners of the American Idol business and Elvis Presley Enterprises and the rest of this really interesting portfolio are looking for a CMO. And part of my purview at Sony was the Elvis catalog. So I already had a
Some
great
familiarity there.
depth of knowledge, with the content and the players there, excuse me. And so I definitely was interested in interviewing, and the rest is history.
And so when you showed up there, like what were the main projects or what were the main pursuits you focused on?
Yeah. So when I joined, at the time it was called CKX. It was a business that was built on the thesis of pipes everywhere, dearth of great content. So we're going to roll up amazing IP and create new businesses out of that. The entrepreneur and the founder of that company was someone named Bob Sillerman, Robert FX Sillerman, who was famous for kind of his reverse merger and roll-up model, starting with radio stations that became Clear Channel. And then he did it with concert promoters, and that became Live Nation. And this was called CKX, and it was focused on IP. And that portfolio was Simon Fuller's 19 Entertainment, which was the owner and producer of American Idol and Idol in 150 countries. And So You Think You Can Dance across JV in TV, but entirely owned and operated tour, talent management, recorded music, launched a publishing company, digital media, and a handful of other businesses, really beautifully kind of horizontally integrated.
So with the Think You Can Dance, but more so American Idol, you still had exposure to the quote unquote like music industry.
Oh, definitely.
There's still music.
Yeah.
Obviously
Idol
Elvis
is, still is differentiated, even though it's lost some relevance, in that it made stars, it sold music. And then we managed those artists.
How was that? How was American Idol? Because it's kind of like a little bit of a turnaround when you went there, right?
Yeah, I inherited it.
How many years in was it when you got there?
9 years, I think.
9 years.
Yeah, it had produced the winner the season prior to me joining was an artist named Lee DeWise, right? An amazing human being, great songwriter, but kind of more of a coffee house type artist. And that was just kind of where America was, I guess, and our judges and the way that we sort of managed our audition process. Anyway, he didn't sell a lot of music, and that was really our metric. Yeah. And so audience had dropped, and it was
was Simon still there? Simon, or was it kind of
Simon Cowell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And who was the host at the time?
It was always Seacrest.
Yeah, I didn't. Does he still do it?
Yeah, I think so.
Shows you how much TV I watch.
I've sort
today.
of disengaged.
Yeah.
Right. So I was there.
That's got to be easy money.
Through the end of our
That's got to be easy money for him at this point.
Well, yeah, just as a side note, in terms of grit and hustle, there's no one that works harder.
I've heard that. I don't know him. He's around Nashville, but I've heard that about him.
Just an absolute, focused animal in that way. Incredibly talented. But yeah, so joined to help revitalize, that platform, and ultimately, the big challenge was the original founder, who was invited to do something else when I joined, had built silos, and these companies didn't really talk to each other, and so it was just missing all of this opportunity to cross-pollinate,
Cross-sell.
right? And so, very quickly things happened that would seem obvious to you, like idols turning on the Christmas lights at Graceland, and Muhammad Ali night on So You Think You Can Dance, float like a butterfly, sting like a
But
bee.
they weren't doing any of that.
But it wasn't happening, at least with any frequency or regularity or in a programmatic way. And so I stepped into that, and then we rebranded the company to Core Media Group and sold it to a private equity sponsor. And my leaders who hired me left. The CFO and the CMO stayed for a little while.
I'm gonna say I've heard, I've never been in that situation, but I've heard private equity coming in could be challenging.
It was a challenge.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, but it was ultimately, if you judge history on outcomes, it was great.
It was great.
Yeah.
What happens after that?
So we sell the company.
What did the company sell for?
Sold for $509 million.
That's a lot.
Yeah, we had one bidder. It's great.
Did they know that?
I don't know what they know.
Yeah.
But it's a room full of smart guys. So I have to assume that they knew that. But yeah, that afforded my family the flexibility to kind of choose our own adventure. And we moved, our boys were raised in Brooklyn, in Fort Greene, until they were 5. And we traded, the kids playing in front of the Barclays Center to a backyard in Bronxville. Moved up to Westchester and renovated a house. And 18 months later, decided we wanted to make a purpose-driven shift and get our kids closer to 2 sets of grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins.
I was going to say, I heard Bronxville's nice.
You know something about Bronxville.
Yeah, my full disclosure. My wife is from Bronxville. Bronxville, New York is an awesome little town.
Yeah.
Right off the Metro North.
Yeah. Well, it's
you could get off at Fleetwood or Bronxville Station.
I think you've been there.
I've been there once or twice.
Yeah. Yeah. It was incredibly convenient. And my lovely wife, Lisa, has, it's funny. I often say to my coaching clients that, your career is not a suicide pact. You can change lanes. But my wife has been at McKinsey & Company for 20 years.
McKinsey consultant?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they've been wonderful to her, and it's been great. It's been great to us as a family, but
every night she psychoanalyzes you and tells you how you need to optimize your performance.
We know the Myers-Briggs pretty well in our family.
That's funny.
No, but yeah, we, she seamlessly, fit into the Dallas office, and then I kind of was looking for what's next, and had a minute to try to make some good decisions, and ended up having a conversation with a conservative media company and in need of a similar playbook.
That's right.
And
Glenn Beck.
And stepped in.
When did Glenn? He was originally I remember first hearing about him. Was it Fox News?
Yeah.
Like that's where he got real big, and then he left. Was that? And this was probably before you worked with him, but was that controversial? Am I making that up in my head?
It was controversial.
And what was it like? Again, was it just controversial to leave that good of a job?
You'd have to ask Glenn.
Yeah, I know.
But this was during the Roger Ailes period.
Just different workplace environment. Yeah,
I think that's a generous way to say it, but listen, it was good for all sides. And Glenn left Fox and started The Blaze.
And that's ultimately the job you interviewed and accepted.
Yeah. And so I joined The Blaze as the chief marketing officer, SVP of marketing there, and with a new leadership team, helped usher that company into a profitable chapter and a merger with a competitor, and good outcome again. Colorful characters.
What was the tactical approach that you needed to execute? You don't need to take 30 minutes to explain, but what was the issue that they were hiring you in effect to solve, and how did you solve it?
Yeah, I think that there was some confusion around what the brand stood for. 1, 2, there were some balance sheet issues, and 3, there was the opportunity to shift the the weighting of the various revenue streams in their business model. And, kind of brought with the president who was hired, and there was a new CFO on the team, brought an IQ to the conversation around, how to drive up daily average users and shift to save some money in our streaming business. And what do we do with a Thursday live audience? And how else can we leverage, all of these, the gifts in their ecosystem into ways to make money, drive profitability, and, reduce some debt. And we were successful in that effort.
And you were there a couple of years. What comes after that?
So after that, I took a job with the CFO who hired me at Sony Music, who was the CFO of an ad tech company in New York called Media Math, a programmatic advertising company, one of the pioneers in that space. And she called me to say that, they needed to start thinking differently about their business model and their ecosystem and how they work with partners. And did I have a perspective on it? Would I talk to the CRO? And I spoke with them, and I hit it off with their CRO at the time. And we decided it would be a good idea for me to commute from Dallas to Fort World Trade Center for 2 years every week.
I don't know if that sounds like a good idea.
In retrospect, we don't need to spend a lot of time on that chapter. Was instrumental in helping build a couple tens of $1 million business, $40 million business there. But ultimately, it came to a point where one of my children told me that I live in New York and visit.
I was about to say, I was going to ask you to kind of wrap that conversation together. It's like your career's accelerating. You're constantly like kind of moving up. Let's call it the ladder of your profession, and so I'm guessing the work became more and more intense and important, but like demands. And then how are you managing that with your commitments at home to your wife and children?
Yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't. And that sort of led me.
Was that moment your kid kind of like, and he probably didn't even know what he was doing. He was just like, oh, you live in New York. And you're like,
just a genuine child.
Just punch to the gut.
Yeah. Who missed his dad. Yeah. I heard that loud and clear. And basically, I came to a point where I had to, it's sort of Jerry Maguire part 2, right? Mm-hmm. Where I had to reflect on, why am I making the choices that I'm making? What's driving me to do the things that I'm doing? And ultimately I arrived at a really, frustrating kind of awareness that it was ego and it was money, plain and simple. And I had to ask myself the honest question of, is that the legacy that you want to leave, right? And so that was September of 19. By October of 19, I had joined a partnership in an event company based in Dallas-Fort Worth. And as part of that deal, I assumed, a minority stake in the company. And it fit with my values, again, of being close to my family and trying to be at dinner every night versus, a Zoom, good night. And I also, just from a business standpoint, I had this philosophy that the pendulum was swinging back away from the last decade of, advertisers' rush to digital scale of right offer, right time, on the right device, to the right people, to back to Kyle meeting a brand, shaking its hand, looking it in the eye, and deciding if it trusted it, right? So rather than being marketed by Cartier, let's say, on your phone before you met Cartier, you could walk into the Fifth Avenue flagship and be cloaked in the, fur coat of the Cartier brand.
I was there 72 hours ago.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, I got out of there. unscathed.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you probably had a glass of champagne.
No,
and
I had
stepped on the soft carpet.
They offered it, but like that's how they get you. It's like they're like a different iteration of a casino. They get you drunk and you make bad bets, right? They get you drunk on that champagne, and then there's a $20,000 gold nail that's a bracelet, and and you make
it's a great idea.
You make bad decisions,
right? You never regret that.
Or there's like a bracelet with a jaguar, and I was like, I don't know, man. I think you could get that off 51st and 6th, like for like
it may have a different composition.
Yeah, nobody knows that. Come on.
Yeah. Who are you fooling?
The problem is, my wife knows that. Yeah. So
well, she
can't do that.
She's the expert.
Exactly.
But so the idea is that I had was like that's where we need to start, and then that gives us permission to market relentlessly to you once you've said I identify with that brand. And so I joined an event company, and part of the business was producing large-scale consumer activations, like launching Pokemon Go in Manhattan. Like if you remember when that, giant Pikachus appearing and disappearing.
You want to know? It's a somewhat funny story. One day, one of our executives is he has to leave the office. It's like 3:00, going to who knows, his kid's soccer game. It could be a business meeting. He goes down the parking lot of our building. This was when we were out in LA. And in the parking lot, it was surface level. One of our younger professionals is he's kind of like walking weirdly throughout the parking lot. Like something was wrong, but like kind of very herky-jerky, like left 10 steps and looking at his phone. And the executive's like my age. He doesn't know what's going on. He's like, hey man, you okay?
You having a seizure, man?
He's like, yeah. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. And then the exec's like, are you playing Pokemon Go? He's like, yeah. He
busted.
He didn't last. But that's a true story. That's my only exposure to Pokemon Go.
He didn't last, not because he was playing Pokemon Go.
No,
but because it might have been
maybe his priorities were a little different. Let me. You had mentioned you kids say, hey, in New York, and it's like success and money. But I do want to just touch on the money thing. Is in this seat, I've had the privilege and benefit to interview people who've had what we call liquidity events, those moments where their hard work and in a very concentrated moment pays off. And I think to a degree that happened for you when you're, what I call idle. It sounds like there's a lot of companies there, and you had that private equity exit. What was that feeling like when kind of a culmination to a degree, and you get the call and the deal closed? And I know there were a lot of partners, and not all of it went to you, of course, but like when you really do have that moment and it's very real and the wire comes through, what is that feeling like, and how did that feel? How did it feel relative to maybe what your expectations were, your whole career, where you're building towards something like that? Maybe
I had no plan. It was a surprise to me. I mean, when I interviewed, I knew that was the kind of the end game, but I didn't know how advanced the conversations were, and so that was relatively speaking, it was a surprise. I was just grateful, because I didn't listen in my world. I try not to have expectations because they lead to disappointment.
Managed expectations,
Yeah. And so I was just grateful. And of course, once it sunk in, I wished that I'd joined the company earlier, which was irrational because that opportunity didn't exist. I wished that I had started that company, which I couldn't have done.
Yeah.
Right. So that's all the magical thinking of any executive, I think. But
was there, but on the financial side, was there a little bit of a relief? It's like financial anxiety where it's like, okay, I can.
But my wife and I are, we're pragmatists. So we never stopped.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So speaking of keep going, eventually it led you to, and you had done this earlier, but really it seems like your focus said, correct me if I'm wrong, Gannett Partners, like eventually you just touched on, I wish I started that company, but you have done that now.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, the idea of it ultimately came when 3 months after I joined the event company, the pandemic hit and had a catastrophic event.
Did the pandemic affect events?
It did. It really limited people's ability to
that's news to me.
Come together in communities. The the what I envisioned building there, obviously couldn't happen. And so I was I found myself in a spot where I had a turnaround on my hands that I did not forecast and didn't have a plan for. And simultaneously, my dad got COVID very early and died within weeks, like very, very swift. And it was early in the pandemic. It was, I think I mentioned it was before even 50,000 Americans had died. And so there was a great amount of confusion and hysteria around the pandemic. The industry was collapsing. Artists were committing suicide because they couldn't earn a living.
Yeah.
It was a really, really dark period that everybody went through in different ways. But I Jerry Maguire moment part 3, right? It was, how do I square all of this? Like, being an adult is hard, right? I don't have all the answers. And prior to that, I kind of prided myself on being the guy who kind of had the answers. But I came to an awareness that this was beyond me. This was outside of anything that I could handle on my own. And so, got to work with my partners looking for areas of the economy where social distancing was baked in. And we arrived at drive-ins. And at the same time, just muddled through the aftermath of my dad's death, and keeping the family together and keeping them focused on what mattered. The fact that we loved each other, and ultimately, this is something that happens, right? And there's an array of lessons for my children, and it actually brought us together, thankfully. On the business side, we just hustled. Had to cut the company in half. I was the chief strategy officer of that business, and in the midst of mourning my dad, the rest of the company got out and stalked every drive-in movie theater owner in the U.S. and Canada.
How many are there?
350.
Yeah.
Yeah, and signed them to 2-year exclusive music agreements and beat the biggest competitor in the space to accomplish that. Wow. Turned around and did a deal with Garth Brooks and his manager, Randy, to produce a one-night-only show, a pre-recorded concert to nobody. And
friends in low places.
Showed it to over almost 400,000 people in North America.
And this was in
2020.
Yeah, 2020 when it was hardcore.
Yeah, created liquidity for the company, gave it a platform to retrench, and I sold my shares.
Making lemonade out of lemons, right?
Yeah, but coming out of that, and I exited the business because my partners, respectfully wanted to do that as their business model, and I had a different view of terminal value businesses, and they went on to be successful for a series of really great events. But I left and decided that I would take this cumulative experience, all this awareness that I'd built up, and I went to Berkeley to their executive coaching institute to learn about executive coaching, because I thought that I had this body of work and all of these insights, and I'd been investing in young companies and doing my best to support the founders of those companies, for the decade prior. And I really wanted to understand how I could not only be a cheerleader, as I was, and a mentor, as I had been for many years, and an advisor, which is very hands-on and prescriptive, but be a coach, which is more about kind of pulling out the answers that a lot of these executives already knew. I didn't know how to do that. And
so you said, I want to go to a program where I can receive some iteration of like formal education on it. Yeah. Now, is the executive coaching program at Berkeley, is that in the same building as the Antifa coaching program? Is that?
Yeah, it is.
Come on, you got to let me have a little fun.
No, it's
I don't
funny.
like Berkeley. I don't like anything about that school because they're the only school that beat us my senior year. We were 12-1. Yeah. We did end up winning the national championship, but they beat us, and I'm still salty about that.
I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm going to suggest that there wasn't one student of the Executive Coaching Institute on that football team.
Probably not. Probably not. My wife was a cheerleader. This is a true story. And running off the field, they were starting to storm it. Someone threw a beer bottle, like just randomly in the air, or some can hit her. And like, so I hold grudges.
I would too.
Yeah.
I would too.
Berkeley.
Just carry that to your grave.
Oh, hey, whatever gets me up in the morning.
I know.
No, it's a beautiful school. It's actually the site of my first game I ever played in Strawberry Canyon. Because their program historically hasn't been huge. Obviously, a buddy of mine, A-Rod, played there, and Marshawn, they had some good years. But it's one of the most beautiful places.
I did it during COVID. So, not until a graduation ceremony did I set foot on campus.
Yeah, I was going to say, they probably weren't open. But.
Yeah. But you
learned a lot.
Yeah. And, Berkeley was right for me. There are several great programs for coaching. I think, Columbia has a great program. Emory has a great program. Brown has a great program. But again, same reason, WashU was right for me in St. Louis. It was just kind of the program. I felt a kinship there.
And so that's now you're doing a lot of executive coaching.
I came out of it with this just like unbelievable kind of understanding of who I was. It was a really eye-opening experience. As you might imagine, very mindfulness driven, right? Just a little hippy dippy, little woo woo. But through the course of that program, I got to coach executives at LinkedIn and PG&E and some Bay Area companies, and I realized that I was not bad. I was reasonably good at it, and wanted to do it for more than one company at a time, and that brought me to this idea that there's no barrier to entry in coaching, and frankly, it's a wild west and lots of talent and lots of charlatans out there. Lots of brands of it. I'm not a life coach. I'm an executive coach with 30 years of operating experience. But I saw a lane for a different type of company that was about evidence-based performance. And I didn't see many value propositions, whatever the company looked like out there, that were resonating with the various stakeholders they needed it to resonate with to be successful. And so I launched Gannett Partners on the idea that there were 3 legs to the stool, and those 3 legs enabled us to be incentive aligned with our partners, our clients. And the first is executive coaching, which is, for us, it's a combination of mindfulness, neurology, kind of brain-based leadership coaching, physiology, kind of thinking about the body's response to stress, and how to build resilience. Adult development psychology. We're affiliated with the Institute of Coaching at Harvard Medical School's McLean Institute. And that's very much adult development psychology, clinical and research-based. We're very active there. And the practical kind of dimension of building businesses. I've had a couple home runs. I've had more bunts and fouls and, where I was not let in the stadium, frankly. And there's value to all of that. And so, the coaching business addresses the heart and mind of the founder and de-risks the investor's investment in a young company, but also helps the leader kind of scale faster than their company in the growth stages. And then we also work with sports and entertainment talent to help them kind of self-actualize and build companies.
And speaking to the business clients, what do you find is the biggest problem in some way they might be bringing you in to solve, or the biggest hole that they may be looking to fill?
Yeah. Well, it usually starts with they have no idea. But what we find frequently with high performers, and we only work with high performers. We try not to find ourselves in situations where we need to fix, but we have the opportunity to open the aperture and to accelerate. With high performers, they feel like imposters.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right?
If I had to guess, I was going to say imposters.
Yeah. Do I deserve this? Do I belong here? Am I in the right seat?
I don't really know what I'm doing.
Right. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I don't know. And so oftentimes it kind of starts there. It doesn't always. But then we help them kind of understand their internal operating system. What are their internal biases? What are the shadows? What are the gifts? And and we equip them with the ability to understand how to leverage those reactive tendencies, those creative competencies, so to speak, and pull out those leadership styles in specific instances that demand that in order to drive the outcomes that they desire. And that's evidence-based. So like literally we hold ourselves to the same standard as a business leader of we're not in it to share our feelings every day. We're in it to help you achieve a specific outcome, right? But that's coaching. And then the second piece or the second leg of the stool is operating advisory or company building. And that's where we move from heart and mind into value and returns and come inside the business with that client and help them accelerate their company in areas where we have specific expertise.
What are those areas of expertise? I mean, I know yours, but just what do your buckets look like?
Institutionally, it's sort of brand and competitive strategy, right? Strategic positioning, so forth, messaging platforms. How do you establish credibility in your category and then accelerate growth on top of that? And that leads into go-to-market. So understanding how to calibrate a sales organization and optimize for the specific outcomes that you want against who you're selling to. You'd be surprised. A lot of companies have no idea, who their ideal customer is, right? They don't know how to create a territory plan. They don't know how to build a sales funnel. I'm kind of, sharing some really basic blocking and tackling, but that's where we move from brand strategy into go-to-market. Then we also work in strategic growth. And some of that is M&A, finding buyers, aligning with capital partners, developing channel partnerships, right? For different businesses tend to be technology businesses. So folks who have a massive sales organization that can take your product to market, or vice versa. And then thought leadership, establishing credibility through sharing expertise. And there's lots of flavors in between there. Sales training,
And I assume you work with companies, that could be 50,000 people all the way down to companies that might be 10 people. Just
might be 5 people.
Might be 5, yeah.
Might be 5 people with a 5 million pre-seed round raised.
Is it more tech companies? Or?
It has been that way. It has been that way, but it's also been, working with families of athletes to help them optimize businesses that they start.
You got to watch out for those families of athletes.
I know.
Bad dudes.
I know. But, they're so interesting. They're not bad dudes. They're amazing. And what they bring to the table is unique relative to, the other types of clients that we serve.
Yeah, so, very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what a company that has 5 employees needs is different. Going from 0 to 10, million in revenue is different from or 10 people, frankly, is different than 10 to 100. It's different.
I've lived it.
Yeah, So we support that growth.
And talk to us about what I'll call your philanthropy, but I know you're on lots of boards. Obviously, the Doc Cares.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. When I moved to Dallas, I have no intention of ever leaving. So I'm dropping roots, in a way that is sustainable and sincere. So I serve on boards or steering committees of institutions that I love. Dallas Museum of Art is one. I've always been involved in the museum. I was at the groundbreaking of the museum back in the 80s. My mom was on the committee that evaluated how to build the children's wing there and visited the best children's museums, all around the world to bring those insights in. And then when I was married, we had our reception at the Dallas Museum of Art. And so that's a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm involved in kind of helping them progress into the next generation. There's a lot of exciting things happening there. And then with the DOC, who was on your show previously, I've helped him set up Doc Cares, serve as the president of his nonprofit and foundation. And,
I'm excited for the movie.
There's so much amazing
right?
activity. It's incredible, but
Again,
Yeah.
I'm serious about that premiere invite, though.
It's coming.
All right,
Yeah.
good.
You don't be
Just
concerned. about
gives
it.
gives me a lot of street cred, you know? My kids think I'm cool now.
Yeah. So, setting up Doc Cares and serving DOC in this way of building a platform for him to take his vision of the future of Dallas and more broadly kind of ways to deliver, impactful solutions in the areas of education and civic and community engagement, in reducing gun violence and in financial equality. Our first big initiative is in the education vertical, and that's the Dreams Experience Academy, which you'll hear more about, in coming months. But establishing a community-based learning platform that is enabling, a community, broadly speaking, that has, for centuries been overlooked and underappreciated and underfunded, to find their way into careers in the $3 trillion media, entertainment, and tech combined industry. It's super exciting, and core to my belief that what's happening in Dallas and North Texas broadly is this golden moment, and
It is
those
wild,
who are
man.
there.
The Dallas Metroplex is just on fire,
We want to make sure that all boats rise with the tide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family, professional career, coaching, philanthropy, like kind of putting it all together in one bucket. What does the future look like for you?
I don't know. It's all a gift. But what I do know is what I'm doing now, the company I'm building is very clearly supporting my purpose in the world as I see it. I've come to the realization that my straightest line to joy is being of service, and I get to earn a living doing that, which is amazing. Started the company 2 years ago. We've grown 100% year on year for those 2 years. I've added an operating partner in Europe, based in Lisbon, Portugal, and just added an operating partner in New York. Two amazing.
You make them come to you, though, all right?
I'm happy to go to them. Beauty of Dallas is it's 3 hours from anywhere.
This is true.
Yeah, I can be anywhere. It's amazing, including Nashville.
That's right.
We're serving a broad array of clientele. We've now served clients in 10 countries across 15 industries, and I don't see us slowing down. I think we'll have another 100% growth year next year if we execute the right way. And just kind of wake up every day looking for ways to be of service, and good things seem to happen. Yeah.
What would your advice be for people in their career, regardless of industry, whether they're just starting out or they're 15, 20 years in, and they want to, they have a definition of success, however they laid it out, and either they're not there or they feel like they're not progressing. It seems like you had to some degree a vision or certainly a direction you were heading, and you hit a lot of it on the way. What would your advice be, just general advice on how to get where they want to go in life, at least from a professional standpoint?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think one is not being rigid about where you're going or how you need to get there, right? Knowing where you're going is important, right? Otherwise, we end up someplace we
don't want to be.
Maybe we don't want to be. But staying flexible in terms of the way that you arrive there, right? I was able to work in an industry that I was personally passionate about, but it took time and it required patience, and it required me at various points in my journey to be able to look in the mirror and acknowledge where I was holding myself back, right? I had to ask myself why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And if those answers made sense, then I knew that I was on the right path. But if I couldn't answer that clearly, maybe it wasn't a fit, or I needed to try something else. And so I think giving young people should give themselves some grace, permission to experiment.
I was gonna say give themselves some time too.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
mean, listen, one of my biggest, I would say, in retrospect, failures was my impatience. I needed to get a title, by the time I was X years old. And the truth is, we're ready when we're ready. We're not ready when we want to be ready. And so you may find that if you get that title too early, it's not the experience that you hope it would be because you don't have the requisite skills or perspective or judgment to hit the notes that you want to hit. So, patience,
Yeah, we have a lot of young professionals here and, it's 18 months in and I'm not at this level and like, well, that's not normal, number one. Number two, it's like, give yourself time. Like, keep working hard, keep going hard every day, but like, relax.
Yeah.
Relax. Like,
and
God willing,
and you're not
life is
entitled
long.
to anything.
No.
Just because you've been in a seat for X amount of time, X number of minutes or hours or days, it doesn't entitle you to a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, a lot of it ultimately, I mean, listen, it's the, I don't know. We deal in a business of outliers, and, leaders emerge and create a force multiplier for businesses, but not everybody's a leader and not everybody is meant to be a leader.
Do they know that?
Not always. Yeah.
That's the rub. What in your experience looking back at your career has been the biggest consistent characteristic or trait, commonality in people who worked underneath you, above you, and around you who were really successful in whatever company or industry you were in, again, primarily music? Like what do you say, like when you look at whether it's 10 people or 100 people that you've had the opportunity to really get to know, or like, man, that gal's like really, really good, really successful and doing well. What's been that common characteristic, that common
I love that question.
trait?
Yeah. I think there's probably a few things. One is they're curious, right? They're unsatisfied with just kind of meeting a goal, right? Two, they ask for help. A lot of people feel like if I ask for help, I'm advertising some kind of ignorance or shortcoming.
Lack of capability.
Or lack of capability, right? I find that I have the most success as a leader when I evidence some vulnerability. People want to follow a human.
Mm-hmm.
They want to follow someone who invites their feedback. They want to follow someone who is living out a clear purpose. People are attracted to purpose, right? I think being ambitious is great, but especially as a young person, you're not going to have all the answers. So, kind of remembering who brung you and asking for help. What's wonderful, I can think of several, I say young people who worked with me on any of my teams in the past, and they're amazing leaders now. One is leading marketing for, a $1 trillion business that has a very flourishing music business, as part of its broader tech portfolio, and it looks like a fruit, right? And I get a call from him, I don't know, every few months. Hey, what's up? How you doing? And then I get, AirPod Pro, or what is it?
Yeah, AirPods.
The big ones. It just showed up in the mail. Now, I don't necessarily say
I need friends like that.
You need to gift your old bosses and mentors.
All my friends give me are problems,
Yeah. Just ask for it,
Yeah.
But no, they remember your impact on them. I try to do that myself. I had, when I left banking and went into music, just to name check him, at the time, the president of the legacy recordings division, a guy named Adam Block, looking at you, Adam, he was the guy who greenlit me and let me as a music fan become a music guy. He's the one who stuck his neck out a little bit. And Adam, ran an amazing business at Sony. He then left and ran an amazing business at Amazon, leading their catalog. And then he left, and now he's sort of living out his dream. He and a partner acquired the Morrison Hotel Gallery, which is this amazing gallery of artistic photography, the most important music photography in the world. Think about those black and white photos of a 19-year-old Aretha Franklin in Sony Studios, or
it's art.
Yeah, but I call him, I try to speak with him, every year to say, hey, thanks for giving me a look.
That's cool.
Appreciate it.
Now I'm going to ask that question in reverse. What has been the biggest reason people haven't, they communicate to you, hey, Chris, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to get this promotion. I want to do these things, and they don't. What has been the most common, in your humble opinion, the most common theme as to why they don't get to where they want to be?
They can't get out of their own way.
How so?
I think it goes back to understanding their internal biases, the idea that they have to control the outcomes. I'm that way. I just personally, I stopped drinking 8 years ago, and I found that was a decision that unlocked entire dimensions of my life. That I learned how to go with the flow. I learned, I essentially remembered row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Right? It wasn't row your boat up the stream.
True.
So I was always rowing up the stream. And oftentimes when people are really gunning for something and they find themselves frustrated or stymied because they weren't getting what they thought they deserved or what they wanted, it's because they were trying to engineer the outcome when they really just needed to let go and do what's right in front of them, the best that they can do, and let the rest of it come to them in its own time. It's really hard for a young person. It's hard for anyone. But that's, I think, the key for me.
All right. Well, this has been great. I'm going to have you go coach up some of these agents on how to market properties. That's for sure. It's a tough market out there. They need some help.
It would be a privilege.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for coming to Nashville. I'm going to be in Dallas. We have a big office in Dallas. So I told Doc I'm going to hit him up.
We'll do it together.
Yeah, do some rapping with him. But we'll have to hang out. And I really appreciate you.
He can teach anyone to rap, by the way.
I know that, man. He's the OG.
Yeah.
So we'll do it together. We'll start a Feel a Fresh crew, a new one though.
Nice.
All right, brother. It's good hanging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.